you demented moles. It's time to dust off your starter jackets, rip off those tearaways, and blow into your game cartridges. I'm Sam Blanford, going in like a wild cat.
I'm Pat Sellers. It's hot, it's humid, and it's sticky.
I'm Sean Kelly, going in like cattle trucks in a shunting yard.
And I'm Simon Blanford, and we wish it was the 90s. As it is my first time hosting, it's panic stations here, but I can't afford to do that every time I'm under pressure. So, as you've all probably guessed from those ridiculous quotes, today we're very excited to bring you a podcast on Jonah Lomu's Rugby, arguably the best sports game ever made. But before we do, we need to give credit to the OGs, and I'm just going to talk about a podcast that I released in 2009, the Simon Blanford podcast. It was one episode in total, cost probably about, I think, £70 just for one episode back then in the heady days of the internet. Had some big dreams that never really came to fruition. Had a few mates at the time who were overseas, Perry, Hack, and Logan Oliver. We were all big Bill Simmons fans and listened to podcasts a lot before many other people did. So Logan and I sat down after a night out at 2 a.m. in Tunbridge, Kent, and banged out a podcast about Lomu's Rugby, which might still be floating around on various people's 15-year-old iPods. I know it's online, but sadly no headphones can plug into it anymore. So I just want to give a shout out to Logs, the OG. We hope we don't embarrass the memory of that podcast tonight.
Got Logs.
Yeah, and speaking of memories, we're going to take a trip down memory lane ourselves, starting with Pat Sellers. So tell the folks at home, Pat, your memories of Jonah Lomu's Rugby.
Well, I've got memories of Jonah Lomu's Rugby, but not of any podcast I created in 2009 about it. My greatest memories of Jonah's was playing against my brother, as I suppose a lot of people would have had the same experience. In the Hutt Valley, we used to go down to a place called Video Easy and hire the PlayStation if we got there early enough.
Explain to the folks at home what was a video store.
Video Easy was like Netflix, but in a building. And you could go there and rent out one show or movie at a time on something called a VHS. But you could also hire a PlayStation if you didn't have one.
I was more of an amalgamated video fan.
Oh yeah, okay. Upmarket, you were towards what's the Flash series around there? Anyway, but that was eventually bought out by a global company called Blockbuster. I assume that's still going really well, and so we'd get that out, and it was just hours of Jonah Lomu Rugby, telling our parents that we were in bed every hour or so when they'd come back out. And just arguing about what the rules were, why I hadn't broken them, and why he had, which we'll get into later because everyone had their house rules in this game. Which, it became like a pool match. Everyone has house rules, and
do you fear against Jimmy?
Did I fear against? How did I fear?
Yeah,
you asking me or him? Obviously, brilliantly. I'd had a 90% strike rate. I've got a great memory, that, after many concussions. And I'm pretty sure he kicked my ass. But I used to get first choice of team, and he would be like a second tier team, and we'd have a good go. But yeah, that was my memory of Jonah's, and still is, because I don't think I have really played it since then. Except now my brother's got kids almost the age we were at the time. Is he's found a version of it, and he's trying to get them into it, and they are pretty keen and seem to not throw the controllers at each other like we used to. But, yeah.
That's what this is all about, passing it on to the new generation, really.
Ooh, yeah.
So Sam, what about yours? My younger brother Sam, who no doubt he's got some memories.
As most games went as when we were young. I did a lot of watching of Simon play. I was an extremely poor loser. Still am.
We both were.
Yeah, no, I was way worse, and and so I would do a lot of watching you play your friends generally because I just couldn't hack losing to you. Um, when so I'd played a lot of single player, a lot of Territories Cup, and not so much classic matches, but I also when I got to high school and Simon was no longer in the picture, Ollie Sullivan and I used to pretend we were coming home to my house to study. We'd do about 30 minutes of algebra study and then we'd fire Lomus up. But I remember witnessing a lot of, well, actually one memory I do have was we had hired it a lot, Simon and I, to play it. And I saved up $80 to buy a copy of it before it went platinum. And I remember Simon absolutely ripping me to pieces about why the hell did I buy that game. And unbeknownst to him, he played it a lot more than me, that copy, at that stage. I think like 2 weeks later it went platinum and it went down to like $40. But I was glad I got that copy with the Jonah Lomu on it, not the dud platinum copy.
Silver banding on it.
It was fantastic. I genuinely don't know where it is. I reckon Ollie Sullivan stole it and then it got scratched up. So if you're listening to this, Ollie, I'm coming for you.
Yeah, so Sam and I think we sort of came to an unspoken agreement with most of the sports games that we had to play cooperatively because if we played against each other, it just wouldn't end well. So I think you are right about that. My memories, so I guess we played it early, like literally in the 90s, and then I kind of feel like I went through a bit of a resurgence in the early 2000s for me. So I used to go around to Shane Julian's house a lot, Kensington Ave, top floor, play a lot against Shane and his brother Ricky, both excellent players, and Michael Biff Pehe, who was excellent real-life rugby player. Couldn't quite foot it with the Julians and Lomus, but not a bad player in his own right. And then Cam Porlick, of course, used to come around a lot and play Lomus, and fantastic player.
There's some Hutt Valley greats coming out in this. You're the biggest podcast for the Hutt Valley in a long time.
Yeah, a fantastic player and a real purist of the game as well. He was a man with real principles when it came to Lomus rugby. He knew what was acceptable and what wasn't. And our lives, revolved around it far too much. When one day he came to me and sort of, as if he had to reveal some secret, and he said, "Simon, Glenn Osborne, real big friend, real big." Still remember that as a hilarious moment and a lesson as to why we played the game far too much. But yeah, those are my lasting memories of the game. How about yourself, Sean Kelly?
I actually want to open with a really more recent memory. I mean, not that recent, but I was at a wedding and unfortunately not in the game, but Corey Jane was there and it's towards the end of the night and he was talking about how everyone has that one skill that they back themselves to be better than anyone in the room against. And he turned to me and he said, "Sean, what's your skill?" And I said, "Jonah Lomu rugby." He said, "No, mate, I'll smash you at that." The early memories, it was the second PlayStation game I owned after Formula One. And I hammered a lot of solo play in those days, much like Sam. And then, much like you, Simon, had a high school resurgence. And we actually, the Todd McSweeneys, the David Rices of the world, who are excellent players. I played a lot when I was younger with Todd and Rory, like I did watch X-Men, and they caned me. But at high school, by about year 10, when we were discovering booze and silly behaviour, we decided that we would host Jonah Lomu rugby tournament. I think we had three.
Those were quite they were quite exclusive, weren't they?
Yeah, the Super Six. Sorry, Pat.
Yeah. Still waiting for my invite, mate.
We had a shield. GK got it made up with the same trophy people that did Valleys, and we had a few tournaments for the final tournament, the third tournament. we actually even hired a projector screen and put it on a big giant white wall.
Great
Wow.
experience.
Nice.
Probably to the detriment of the game in terms of pixels. And that night ended in a several inappropriate letterboxing incidents and spewing on the stairs outside my flat. So we had to bin the Lomu's tournaments. But as we live in the age of nostalgia, wish it was the 90s, would like to host a Lomu's tournament.
Yeah, boy.
Many details to come, but at this point, I'm asking for all of our 17 followers to check if they've got a copy of the game, working controllers, a PS1 or 2. I think over the next few months we could organise ourselves a nice little Lomu's tournament and find out who is the best Lomu's player in the world.
What
Are you telling me that I'm finally invited to one of your Lomu's tournaments?
You'll
It's only taken 20 years.
You'll have to go through the qualifying rounds, Pat.
What about a PS with a mod chip?
Yeah,
Oh,
that could
I forgot
work.
about those.
That could work. I've got a copy of Lomu's, but I bought it in the UK, so I don't know if it'll work on a New Zealand PS.
Tom Hislop has a copy over there, and he's holding on to it for another 20 years and to try and sell it on eBay.
When I
Probably not a bad tactic.
when I told the kids I was teaching in England that I'd just released a podcast about Jonah Lomu's rugby, this kid who, probably barely knew what rugby was, the next day just brought a copy to school. So I was able to play it for the rest of my OE. But sadly, that's disappeared somewhere. Sean brings up this tournament. And one of the contentious points of discussion, no doubt, for the settings of this tournament is, of course, the camera angle. Jonah Lomu's rugby was famous for having three angles: South Terrace, East Terrace, and of course the most popular, Action Cam. And Sean, for you a South man or an East man? And tell me about that.
Look, Simon, I never once tampered with the view. So whichever one of those views is the standard view, that's the view I know. And
East.
we've made no stipulations for the tournament that we're going to host, but it'll be played in standard view.
100%. I feel like this was a big issue in your household, because when I saw it, I thought the exact same thing was, who the fuck's changing the angle of the camera? And it's obviously one of you.
No,
it wasn't an issue in our household at all.
Oh, okay.
we were South.
Who
We
did
were
you-
South Terrace.
Is that the main one?
No,
So East is the
Oh,
default.
so you've changed it.
What?
we've changed
Yeah,
it.
you've changed it.
As we
Well-
have gotten older, as our Lomu's experience, like when we met more and more people that played Lomu's, pretty much no one played on South Terrace apart from
On the
us.
main view.
No,
No.
Sean.
East
you're talking
Terrace
about East
is
Terrace
the
main
default.
view.
That's your one. You're
Can
an East
can
man.
we call one default and the other one the Blandford?
Otherwise,
pretty
have to
much
do
what
the
it is.
never eat soggy wheat bix and those.
Can I just make a plug for South Terrace before everyone poo-poos it? You could actually see the angles you were running on South Terrace. It's from one end goal to the other end goal. So you could actually see.
Does
Where
it
the
swing
angle
around
goes.
when position changes?
Nope.
So how
No.
do you play against someone?
What do you
Like,
mean?
One's at the bottom of the screen, one's at the top of the screen.
and does
Then
it
it's
change at half time?
Running from north to south would be horrendous, wouldn't it?
No,
Yeah, it's
Why?
like that awful level on Crash Bandicoot.
What about goal kicking? Goal kicking on East Terrace is a lottery. You can't.
No,
with
it's
South
not.
Terrace, you can see the angle.
No. Simon, if you've got stock in this game, you don't miss your kicks.
No, he's meaning kicks and play, I think.
Oh, sorry, apologies.
Yeah, okay.
I'm
Yeah,
actually meaning
that's
both.
good.
I'm meaning both.
Fair.
It was better to kick at goal on South Terrace too. You had better camera angles.
That's been the strongest part of your sale so far. That's actually, that would be good. Yeah.
A lot of arguments that people would say to us were, well, if I'm playing down the screen, I don't know when my halfback is available to pass the ball. It's like, well, the halfback just runs behind and you can see someone standing there. Whereas on East Terrace, like the little icon appeared at the bottom of the halfback's feet, or whoever was going to be playing halfback. So you knew when you could pass it. But it also said pass available on the screen.
What about pass direction if you're going north to south, running down the screen?
Yep.
So a right-handed pass is still R1?
R1?
So
no, it's just literally
the way of
the pass. So it's L1 if you're going to the left as you're looking at the screen, and then R1 if you're looking at the screen to the right. So it's the same.
Which makes a lot of sense.
I cannot support this, and you've upset
me. That takes it out. That takes out any ground you made with the kicking for territory.
What did you play at home? South Terrace, East Terrace? Hit us up in the Slacks. Let us know. Are Sam and I crazy, or is the default view the best?
Are there any weirdos out there using the action cam?
I think that you always
maybe we should do the tournament with action cam just to really fuck with everyone.
Good leveler. Yeah. Good leveler.
Just in the final 15 minutes of action cam.
Ooh. Yeah, really change it up. I won't have to worry about it when I make it there.
I think by the time, because everyone that we played against played East Terrace, we got used to it. I think I struggled with East Terrace initially because of the passing, because I'm holding the remote or control. Why am I calling it a remote? The control, and I would often pass the wrong way. Noob, I know, but because I was used to South Terrace, and passing away the L1 and R1 was actually facing the screen. I found it quite hard to figure it out after a while. I got better, obviously.
So, Pat, you earlier in your memories alluded to some house rules. So today we've got a bit of a list of some potentially contentious issues when it came to Lomu's rugby. What was acceptable, what wasn't. One of my most painful memories is playing against Shane Julian and him being on the 22 and then him all of a sudden screaming at the TV with ball in hand, "Here comes the Gary!" And up would go Gary Owen. And I would always complain this was cheap because you were basically making it a 50-50 chance whether you scored a try. There were two leapers. If you got there in time, it was 50-50, thus taking a lot of skill out of the game. Your thoughts, please.
I've never had anyone be contentious over a Gary Owen.
Yeah, I reckon it's fair. Especially, if you are either playing with a weaker team or are the weaker player, and you've got to give a bit to chance, just like a real game of footy. You got to throw everything at it. I think it's fair. And if you were the better player, or even players, and you're on the better team, you're probably not going to leave it to 50-50. You're gonna feed the speed and get it to whatever left winger is capable of a fend, and you're over.
Okay, Sam, yours, please.
Yeah, I think probably being a bad Lomu's player now, I would probably do a lot more Garys because it is a bit more of a lottery and I might have a chance. I'd probably do a Gary into the in goal because it's a mark if you catch it in the 22, but it's not in the in goal. I think
it's a well-placed Gary Owen.
Yeah, or they're big in goals. With any of these things, like the way I play PlayStation or games is I don't like cheeses, basically. So I don't mind someone doing a Gary or I don't mind someone offloading, but I don't like them doing it all the time. Like a cheese is basically like, you know what I mean by cheeser?
Yeah.
No, explain.
It's like someone who ducks down in Mortal Kombat and just does the ankle kick the whole time. Yeah.
I like that. I'm going to
the old scumbag.
Used to describe strategies or ways of playing that are really powerful. I would have said a scumbag.
Yeah. I'm definitely a scumbag in every fighting game I've ever played. Yeah.
I'm interested about the Gary Owen and at what point did you guys realise that you didn't have to face the wrong way to put one up? You could just bang one forward and then quickly press back and it would go up rather than long.
Yeah, it was a real life-changing moment for us die-hard Longers players, really.
Yeah, you just pick it up off the back of the scrum as the halfback, take 2 steps towards the goal line, kick towards your goal line and put a Gary Owen up. And then one day you learnt that you could pass it straight to Murdens, press back, up she goes.
I think I figured that out at about 8:15. 30th of March 2022.
You're dating this podcast here, Pat.
Not releasing this for a few months.
Oh,
The one that should be less contentious, I think, is the issue of bunting. So we have to accept that bunting surely is cheap.
I don't know, yes, yeah, it's cheap. But I think the real point of contention isn't whether or not it's frowned upon, it's whether or not it's allowed.
yeah, setting the ground rules from the get-go.
We were very, very anti-bunting to the point where it wasn't even attempted. And if you got away with a bunt sort of mistakenly, and you actually had to return, but if you were sort of running off, you had to return back and have a sort of voluntary tackle. At the point
What would happen in a game, Simon, if you were playing and someone just threw that out the door, scored off a bunt, scoreline says they win?
That might, it's a get out. It's a gots to go situation first and foremost, and secondly, I get what you're saying. If the game's over, sure, but if that had happened to happen in one of our games, then that person off the kickoff would have had to leave the ball, let the other team get the ball, and let them score a try to even it up. It was just not even a part of the game at all.
It's like Formula One, when they do like a overtake that they're not allowed to do, and then they have to give it back.
Yeah. I can recall a final where Rice bunted Chingy, and Rice loves getting booed anyway, but boy did he get booed. But the score stood.
Could you smother a bunt?
Yes.
Smother tackle?
Yes, and you were more likely to drop the ball if the smother ended up going to ground.
What if that result stood if it wasn't Rice arguing the point, or did he just chalk his way through?
Just literally getting more confident the louder the boos are. I got an interesting thing on bunting. I didn't know what bunting was, and then one day in year 9 or year 10 at Silverstream, Jason Baker was talking up the bunt. He'd discovered the bunt, and it was the talk of the town, and wouldn't tell anyone how to do it. And so there slowly became the small group of people who could bunt, and the rest of us could not. And I recall vividly one afternoon after school, myself and Ricky Jones playing Lomus, and one of us accidentally bunting whilst in the in goal, and the hysteria of the bunt. And then the next hour of trying to recreate it. I just think, although it was certainly frowned upon, it was just slightly more accepted when we were playing as a cheap move, something that you shouldn't do, but part of the game.
So I agree with what you're saying. It's obviously then not in the manual.
No.
So
is it part of the game, or is it a glitch?
Well, it's a glitch, isn't it? It's not in the manual. It's a glitch.
Yes.
It's almost a glitch or a cheat, because if you think about Shane Warne's cricket, your Superman, your Solid Oak, your cheats and Shane Warne's.
What was the catching one?
I can't remember what that one was. But those are actual cheats. So it's either a cheat or a glitch. Either way, it's not a part of a game not a proud part of our game, really.
How do you differentiate bunting from offloading? It's essentially the same glitch.
Well, that's a really good segue there, Sean, because some
a lawyer
people
like David Rice argue that it's passing, so passing's in there.
Every time I played, offloading was part of the game. Just
Yeah, I mean,
absolutely part of the game.
When I played with the aforementioned Cam Porlock, offloading was not part of the game. And I think the reasoning behind this was, it's a bit of a silly argument to say that we're trying to be realistic, but I will make it because, with offloads, a regular pass left to right. By the way, what a great feature was the L1 and L2 feature, the skip pass. That was just such a simple, wonderful feature, but I digress. You could be going to ground in a tackle, and then your offload could be this 10-meter bullet either side, and that would just happen time and time and time. Offloads aren't bullets, but these passes were absolute bullets, and you could just get so good at them that it was almost impossible to stop without the old circle, the grapple tackle, as it were. Now, of course, I think they were more part of the game, but our house rules were no offloads at my house. But if you played at Shane's, offloading, that was his bread and butter. So
Can imagine Shinner absolutely loving an offload.
He loved it.
And maybe a frowned upon bunt every now and then just to rack someone up.
Even Shane had his limits. Come on.
I'm surprised Pollock was anti offloads. From what I remember of Cam going back a number of years, he was a big leaguey fan, so I would have thought he'd been all about them.
Big leaguey, yeah, but a
Does he still have that Renoff headgear?
Does he still have it? Good question.
More Menzies than anything.
No, I gave Cam Porlock my Jeff Tuvey Seagulls jersey when we were at Hunter Media, and then he returned it to me when we were about 18 after a few nights at Zebo's.
Oh, good.
Good man.
It leads to another question that I have, I guess for everyone, but mainly for Simon, who wanted to make the game realistic. The sidestep is in the manual.
Great point.
But that is a very unrealistic move. You move 5 meters.
Yeah, they tried.
But it is in the manual.
I'd like to throw in an edit there as well. Simon said the L1 and L2 was a skip ball. I think it was just L2 because L1 and L2 would have been a fend, wouldn't it?
No, sorry. What I meant was L1 was the pass next to you, and L2 was the skip pass. But I didn't articulate that very well.
Just keeping you honest, mate. Just keeping you honest.
Appreciate it.
Confused me enough to remember the sidestep.
That was L1 and R1, eh?
Yeah, yep.
It was. Yep.
Sometimes just hitting the ball on a different angle was better than a sidestep, though.
The sides.
100%. But every now and then,
realistic too. Even if the sidestep was better, you're like, this looks so much more realistic when you just bounce in or bounce out.
That's a great point, Pat, and I just want to develop that point because what you're saying there is, and just to counter Sean's point, and you are right, it's not the most realistic thing. The sidestep very rarely gave you an advantage, is what Pat I think is saying, right? And I agree with that. So therefore, it was allowed because I don't think it gave you this crazy advantage. It didn't work very often, and when it did work, it was a wow moment. Everyone was like, applause.
You can pull off a sidestep 5 meters out in a one-on-one. That's good to watch.
Great to watch. Good for our game.
And it matches that universal rule you've just came up with, is that it had to be in the manual, and it's in the manual. So
in the manual, yep. Fending was also on the list, by the way, of house rules, and we have to accept fending, don't we?
Yeah,
fending is part of the game. It's what made Jonah the best player.
Good.
We're not playing under sevens ripper rugby where you can't fend.
No, this I'm not sure many people have talked about this one or whether this is a house rule or not. I've written it down in our run sheet, just for the folks at home, as square circling for rucks. Now, what I mean by square circling for rucks is that to enter the ruck was circle, to leave the ruck was square, and there was a way by pressing incredibly quickly, circle, square, circle, square, circle, square, you could sort of shunt the ruck forward. Some would say unnaturally, and that was banned in the Blanford household, the square circle.
This is where you get your finger under your t-shirt and rub them across the buttons really fast. So that really helped. Or get a pencil out or something. But this was definitely our biggest house rule. This is absolute no, and it was definitely the house rule that was broken the most as well. Caused many arguments between me and my
So
brother.
what's your what was your rationale for that being a house rule, Pat? The no square circle in the rucks.
I think my rationale at the time was that my brother was better at it, but I reckon it ruins the flow of the game as well. Like I reckon it was pretty well set up to give you X amount of phases, and you've got to keep making ground, otherwise you end up turning the ball over. And I reckon that sort of kind of fucks the flow.
You're making excuses for your slow fingers.
I'm with you. I'm with Bob.
5 years older than me.
Bob, you seem to disagree with that.
Oh, mate, I remember I owned this game for a long time and only ever played it single player. I didn't even know that other people were fanatics. And then I went around to the McSweeney's once and like, you king for Lomus? I was like, I fucking love Lomus. I'm gonna smash you guys. I play this heaps. and Rosa and Chingy both would have put 50 on me just because I didn't know this ruck glitch. And I never didn't use it again.
I mean, to compete, sure. I mean, look, if I was playing at a house where, that was allowed, of course, you're going to use it, right? You just don't want to lose by 40 points every time and not win a single ruck. But I felt like, just to sort of reiterate what Pat said there, it was kind of a purer way of deciding who won the ruck, right? If you got the numbers there early, you should win the ruck. Whereas there could be some freak like Steve Tutoha, absolute freak.
Dean Simpson.
Absolute freak at the old square circle. And it could almost ruin the game, how many rucks you could win when you didn't really deserve to win them, just apart from the fact you were just a freak at pressing square circle, which some could argue is a skill in of itself, which I grant you.
But it's not footy though. Like you don't see Artie Xavier getting turnovers by entering and leaving the ruck 50 times in the span of 10 seconds.
See, this game is a form of rugby unto itself.
Yeah.
So these little parts of the game are just things that I accept as Lomus. And I love that. There's no other rugby game that has these things.
It's the best gameplay ever.
Were there even penalties?
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah. Just no knock-ons. But you could play without them.
Yeah, if you didn't play without them, you could just stand in the pass between the halfback and the first five and catch it and run off.
Yeah, but you had to play with them if you were doing the classic matches. Wouldn't let you stand in the All Blacks back line with Masuho to win that one.
It's good.
Otto.
There were a couple. This is quite a topical, possible cheap thing to do, and I'm not necessarily agreeing that it is cheap, but we'll put it out there. You get a penalty. You kick for touch 5 meters out from the person's goal line. You win the line out, and you have a pushover try with a maul. What are our thoughts on this, lads? Fair or foul?
Cattle chucks.
Fine. Absolutely fine.
If people are going to sit here and argue about what's rugby and what's not, that's the rugbiest rugby that ever rugbied.
That's Heineken Cup rugby there.
I was going to say that's classic English forward play.
Yeah.
If you've been doing the work on Tuesday and Thursday to have a set piece like that, then go for it.
It's another thing, though, that I feel like I can just see tight games where someone scored off a pushover and controllers are thrown and like cheap prick
Absolutely.
But that's rugby. I thought you were going to say 5 meters.
Sorry, go on.
I thought you were going to say 5 meters out, line out, catch it 6 meters in the air and just run through the air and score.
Yeah, that's a little harder to do in the real game.
That's one of the hardest glitches there is.
Funny glitch, though. Funny glitch.
Did you opt for a short line out in this game?
Yeah, basically never for me. My line out was pretty much impenetrable, so I just
brave words with a tournament on the horizon.
Yeah, sure. I'm
taking notes.
I remember watching you and Cam a lot, and Cam would do a short line out against you because he couldn't compete with your line out, and so therefore he evened the odds by doing short line outs.
Would he just throw straight to one and bring his prop sprinting forward?
Straight to Ubugu at one.
That's great stuff, though. But that's like real rugby. Like,
absolutely
playing against to get a set piece, so he brought in a short line out to try and mix things up.
Oh, no issues.
How good was this game?
What was the trick to doing I remember watching people doing like a pushover scrum or like being able to shunt the scrum real far, and I didn't know what to do. It was like dig in was square and push was circle, but it was different to doing a maul.
You press the other button again, held it for a bit, and then let it off. Which I'm trying to remember.
Yep. Slightly more finesse required than a ruck.
No, put the square back down, right, and then you let it off again, and you do a push.
Yep, that's right.
Also kind of like rugby because you can,
enjoyed that, and
1,
the
2,
old
3, heave.
Who could forget the South African pack weight, the only weight in the game that was over 800 kgs combined? Man, mountains they were.
I think you'll find Team Lomu was 900.
How could I forget? 118 kilos, Jonah Lomu would have been at that stage. Good point, Sean. Good point. And this is a very contentious one as well. Game endings. Now, I feel like this caused the most strife for people around Aotearoa, New Zealand. What are the ways that one can end a game and not be cheap? People were very mad if you kicked the ball out, if you ended with a penalty goal. What's fair and what's foul in this situation, lads?
Yeah, I'm going to go against every other argument that I've made to say it has to be like real rugby and say you can't kick the out. You got to give them a running chance.
A lot of my experiences with tournament play, we played a lot of tournaments, and when it's not for pride, it's for more. That sort of behaviour of kicking it out and stuff like that still will create a salty scenario. But, we legitimately played for a shield, You needed those points. Well, it could come down to points difference into making the playoffs, and you definitely didn't want to come last and get that little horse's ass.
So I think if I played now, I'd be all for whoever's winning when the whistle goes, you can kick it out.
God,
no.
I think
let the game go.
I think when I was young, I was definitely against that. But I'm with Sean. I just think there's too much on the line. And if I was winning, I kicked it out. And if they were salty, I'd be like, look, I'm just too worried you're going to score a ridiculous try. Kicking it out or running along the sideline.
Yeah, that was
tackled.
That was my go-to.
Dropping it out.
Yeah. It's a similar tactic.
That's a real fake tempter.
When we were kids, we used to play rugby in the backyard, and the best way to score a try was to run down the fence line with a concrete fence, because I knew my older brother wouldn't throw me into the brick fence. But, geez, I scored a lot of tries.
After listening to Sean, who I'm going to call the Glitch King from now on.
Oh, how dare you tarnish my name.
After listening to Sean, I reckon he would have done the ultimate glitch. Run into the when there was an out, do a quick throw in the goal in the in goal. So it was a 22
to cause a 22. I wasn't afraid to catch a penalty and kick it so that the penalty scorer would have to kick off too.
Absolute glitch king.
But I would never do that in a tournament game. That's more for shits and giggles. I do have some standards.
We'll find out if that's the truth.
Well, just the laughs, as we called them at the time.
In the old days. There's another glitch that we used, not a glitch really, but another thing that used to happen all the time was that at the end screen, after, the winner had demanded to look at all the game stats, territory, possession, all those important statistics, of course, you'd get out of the game and then it would say replay match. And often, we're playing this in our twilight Lomu years, before uni or after uni. So you've been in a bit of a rush sometimes, or you're parents were coming home and they were going to get mad at you for playing a 15-year-old game whilst still living at home. And so you're in a hurry to get the next game done. And so for Cam and I, it was basically always New Zealand. I was New Zealand, he was England because he was a better player than me. And there was a replay match screen. And some of our biggest arguments was when we both pressed down at the same time. And it went from to yes and then back up to no, replay match no, and you have to go through the rigmarole of starting the game again. It was probably something that only us encountered, to be fair.
Nah, yeah, me and my brother had that as well. Yeah, that was constant. And we decided you had to go with whatever happened. So you'd have to replay the game if if it ended up with a reset match.
Yeah.
Just had to play it out because, play it as it lies.
Play as it lies. Okay.
Good. I think that's a good segue into tiers. You mentioned you were England and he was. Oh no, you were New Zealand and he was England.
Yeah. So tier discussion. Obviously, the ABs are number one on that list, but something that may not be as clear is teams 2, 3, 4, and maybe 5. So you've got, I think, in contention, your old Tri-Nations teams. New Zealand, we'll take them as read. South Africa, Australia, so that's possible 2 and 3. England and France. Would you put anybody else in the top 5, or am I missing somebody there?
No.
Definitely not. Those are the 5 I've got.
Did it not just sort of go off finishing order in the 95 World Cup with New Zealand and South Africa obviously reversed because it's Jonah Lomu's rugby?
Well, this is interesting. I think there's really interesting things to consider.
Fascinating.
The thing that led me to selecting my teams, if I had the choice, was easily identifiable wingers, especially the left wing for the Fend. And so from my point of view, I would prefer South Africa and England over Australia and France for Chester Williams and Rory Underwood. Underwood.
You're
That was
telling
a
me
big-
you couldn't tell the difference between Saint Andre and Delo.
Oh, to say the least.
That's a good point. I've never thought about that before. So, having said that, Sean, what's your order?
I go New Zealand, South Africa, England.
Ooh.
The interesting thing about England is another thing that plays into it, and this is probably my favourite, most rugby realistic thing about this game, is England, if it's a long game, they're in trouble. If you're hammering turbo, you're running out of gas with England. And the other thing I noticed about England is that more likely to lose the ball in contact, which also relates to the actual English rugby team and their incredibly large Unco forwards.
Yeah. Such a realistic game.
Grayson was a real big culprit, though, to be fair, English team. I loved Grayson. He was absolutely so quick off the mark. Great boot, but you tried to pass it before you hit the contact with Grayson because he did lose it a lot. However, sure, he did break our hearts in 95 World Cup, but I thought Stransky was a pretty pedestrian first 5, really.
Boot?
Yeah, good boot, but he was pretty slow. He wasn't Michael Linus slow, but he was pretty slow.
Also realistic.
Yeah, but I thought the English side just had a couple of really good loosies. The South African loosies, I don't know about how good they were. And I thought Williams, because it was so obvious, like so unbelievably obvious who he was. I say that because he was obviously shorter than small. He wasn't the quickest as well. And I just felt like as soon as he got the ball, you were like, as defensively, danger man, so smother. And he didn't quite have that pace that Underwood had, I felt.
Underwood was good.
There's
no denying
it. Was really good, yeah.
So he still is. The game hasn't changed, but
So sorry, Sean, you've got New Zealand, South Africa, England, and then France, Australia. In what order?
Honestly, probably France, but based on that same theory of Saint Andre was a little bit easier to identify than
Intermac. Just a little bit.
Yeah.
no, the Australian left winger. Is that James Small?
No,
Oh,
Smith.
Smith. Yeah.
Yeah,
The whole Australian backline's a bit of a nightmare.
Yeah, I don't think they could have probably made Horan and Little a bit better. They kind of gypped them a bit. I felt like they were.
Smith had black hair. Though.
Horan was outstanding.
Smith did have black hair.
So did Campo.
No. So did Matt Burke. And that was the problem. Burke and Smith were identical. And the amount of times you were playing with Australia, you put on a huge fend with what you thought was Smith, and somebody smashed Matt Burke, and you lost that ruck.
What we know as New Zealanders is that Matt Burke is a pussy.
Pat, what about your tier?
Well, yeah, of best teams, I thought it was always finishing order of 95 World Cup, which I'm actually just looking at. But didn't realise they had a third playoff where France beat England. But I always just thought it was based off that. I think it still is, but I mean, I haven't played the game since I was a kid. But yeah, I thought it was finishing order with South Africa and New Zealand, obviously reversed because it's John Lomu's rugby. So New Zealand, South Africa, France, England.
Yeah, what about
I
you?
think the makers of the game took the poisoning out of the situation and just played things how they really were.
Yeah.
Sam, do you have an order, mate?
Fair.
Yeah, pretty clear order for me. New Zealand, England, France, South Africa, Australia.
Oh, France 3. Interesting.
I really like playing with France. It was also because they had Philippe Salah, who I thought was probably a relative with a close enough last name. Because that's how I thought things were.
And your French ancestry, right?
Pretty sure I'm Scottish, but
all their forwards
that probably proved it.
The French forwards.
French forwards were good. Also, Lacra was a fantastic second five. He actually was the fly half for France in the 95 World Cup, I believe, but they had him as second five.
Did he kick their goals in the game?
Yeah, he did. He was. Well, that's what I was going to ask. Who else was like? Because basically, I'd assume all the minnow teams, they were just like, we'll just make the first five the kicker.
Nah.
We'll touch on that later. We'll touch on that later.
Interesting. Because you got obviously Hastings and Lacroix.
Yeah, Hastings and
Everyone else sort of first fives, goal kickers.
I can't think of anyone else that kicked.
I can.
What, one of the big teams?
Oh, no, on minnows.
Oh, minnows, I know.
Interesting.
We've got a minnow.
I wonder if that French situation with the swapping of the positions there is something to do with what position they played in the playoff. Because we know that the All Blacks 15 is sort of based on the World Cup final to a certain degree, rather than what probably is the best 15 of the All Blacks for the World Cup.
Michael Jones is not starting.
Yeah, because he had church.
But it's funny because this game was actually released in 96 and we missed out on getting Christian Cullen.
Was it 96 or 97?
Devastating, no Cullen. Okay, so I think Australia are the losers there.
What about you, Si? What's yours?
I actually don't disagree. I think England are easily second for me. That would have been my choice just because I think their backs and their loosies are really, really good, apart from Rodber. Richard's fantastic. Backline, really good. And Slightholme actually had a bit of a fend as well. You know, Slightholme was no mug.
He was mint.
It was sharp. He was sharp.
Yeah, and I felt like he did. I mean, Bob, you said you were in a bit of trouble with England turbo-wise. I felt there were other wingers that lost their turbo faster than Slightholme.
Slightholme was good on the pace. I think it was more just that was more a generalisation of the whole England side of running out of steam, and in particular their penchant for coughing up the pill in the contact.
Fair, no, very fair. And I think one interesting thing was we've all kind of thought that Aussie are last on that list. I thought Liner was just terrible. The Smith-Burke problems. Yeah, they just weren't a great side. So, and I don't think that's out of any parochialism on our part. I think we'd all admit if they were a great side, but they probably just weren't. Jonah Lomu's Rugby, one of the great two-player games, universally recognised, at least within our great nation, as that. But little do some people know that it is actually a one-player game as well. And one of the features of the one-player game were classic matches. Now, of course, I have to say, I have to come clean, I never got to the Holy Grail, beating New Zealand with Japan, but I did waste a lot of time trying to do it. Any memories?
Actually, why I'm drinking Asahi tonight in honour of my great victory against the All Blacks.
How did you do it, Bob?
Bunt. Cheap tactics, probably.
Oh, no, because it was before I knew the bunt. I think you could play classic matches without penalties. So that was part of it. But also, you've got Masuho, what was the number 8's name?
Blank.
Oh, God, we're going to get slaughtered in the Slack. But he could fend off his back.
Horokoshi.
That was not his name.
Here's the halfback. He could fend.
What a player, Horikoshi. Great fender. Fender.
So learn, grinding and I think I sort of alluded to this earlier, but this was only a one-player game for me for the first 3 years of ownership. And so I grinded. Simon and Sam know I'm a grinder.
We do.
And so I slowly worked out who were the key players, how was I going to do this, and scumbagged my way through it.
And we were kids, like we had time to just grind and go through the phases of why'd they even make this? This can't be done. This is stupid. And then you finally get there.
I feel like by the sounds of it in the Blandford household, this wasn't necessary because Sam was watching Simon play as friends.
I played a lot of one player, not two player, and I did a lot of Territories Cup, but not classic matches. I got to the final match, but I didn't know how to bunt. I watched a YouTube clip recently of a guy beating New Zealand with Japan, and it was all bunts. Basically, that's how he did it. There were no fins.
To make it easier.
Well, he didn't say that. It was just part of the game that he played, obviously. He was a bunter. But I've heard people... house rules. Yeah, weird. I've heard people...
Well, you don't play the house rules on one player.
I don't think I can think of... I can't think of many more depressing things than winning classic matches through bunting in one player mode. That was really depressing.
I'm 100% sure, no, 98% sure that there weren't penalties on classic matches.
No, there weren't.
You could just stand in the back line.
Yeah, to get the ball back and then work to your fenders.
So,
I think it was
Go on, Bob.
So I think from memory, that particular classic match started at a point where you needed 3 tries.
Yeah, you were down like 17-3 or something like that.
And I remember the first time I scored 3 tries, I butchered the kick in the from the corner.
Oh, that's hard.
Wouldn't it happen on South Terrace?
Yeah, definitely wouldn't. You would have slotted it on South.
Don't change.
Don't talk to me about South. I'm upset that you even brought that back up.
So that's not how you got the famous Team Rage, Team Lomu, and Codemasters teams, though, right? Is that right, or
Territories Cup? So
the Territories, baby. That's why I've got such a great knowledge of the minnows, which we'll come up to soon.
I mean, that is also great grinding. Like you're playing in the Pacific Cup and you've got to try and work out which Pacific nation is going to be the best one for you to win this cup. And I think from memory, probably Samoa.
Was it just Tonga, Fiji, Samoa? Was that all in the Pacific one?
Yeah. I was a big fan of going the worst team in whatever cup it was. So I was always Italy in the Five Nations. Oh no, it wasn't.
They weren't in it.
Sorry,
No.
Wales in the Five Nations.
Mm.
I was always Canada in the America's Cup. Canada, USA, and Argentina. And I was always
What a
Tonga.
shame that New Zealand Māori weren't in that like they were in the 2000s.
Was Hong Kong in one of those cups, I feel like?
The Asia Cup,
Asia Cup with who were the other two teams?
Japan.
Yep.
And Chinese Taipei.
Yeah. Was that Laksanasompong? Was that- was they
It
there?
was Singapore.
Oh, good stuff.
But once you
Singapore didn't make the Asia Cup.
Oh, no.
disappointing.
Was he Singapore or Thailand?
Definitely
Thailand.
Thailand. Definitely
Thailand's in there.
Was
100%.
Singapore a team though?
I don't think so.
Thailand were I think Singapore were a team.
Oh, I
play
take it
with
back
them.
then.
They were a team, and yeah.
Apologies
so
to
you
our
won.
Singapore listeners.
Oh, we've got a lot of Singaporean fans out there. Kieran Ranchod, shout out. But how? So that's how you access Team Rage, Team Lomu, and of course the jewel in the crown, Codemasters.
It's the greatest mug off
Yeah.
in gaming history, Codemasters.
Yeah, I mean, look, the Darling brothers were a force to be reckoned with, but apart from David Darling and the other one, but they weren't a great unit compared with Team Rage and Team Lomu. Who was better, by the way, Team Rage or Team Lomu?
Team Lomu. Because-
no, Team Rage were more fun just because you had that little
Yeah.
Oh,
guy.
yeah. Mather.
Either.
But
Trevor
Lomu-
Williams.
Was
I
that
mean-
some kind of mug off between the developers? How like Team Rage was real mint and Codemasters was.
it's got to be right. Why else
Yeah,
would
that's quite funny.
one of the developers' teams be mint and the other developers' team be awful?
I feel like Rage got the final cut.
I'd be so angry if I was just a average player on Rage, if I was one of the developers. Like Mather, he's famous 27 years later.
What
Yeah.
I want to know is
He must
because
have
it would
been,
have
like,
been
a
more than
developer or some shit.
He must have been head
would have
developer.
been more than 15 developers per company. So how did you make the 15?
Yeah.
How long are we going to pretend that we know how games are made?
They probably just didn't care and didn't realize that people would still be talking about it 20 plus years later. McCabe was the kicker? No,
Yeah, couldn't he kick from the 22?
he could.
But he had stamina issues with his boot.
Did he?
Or maybe I don't know. I could be.
Yeah.
Obviously, Mather had massive stamina issues, real quick off the mark, but Turbo wouldn't last.
Yeah, but what a fend too, though, Mather. He's fending as well as Lomu.
Yeah, but that's why
Probably
the team Lomu has to be the best team because they had 15 fenders with 15 big boots, and
Yeah.
15 quick guys, and for some reason, 15 exceptional goal kickers.
Yeah, he was great goal kicker, Lomu.
Big scrum.
I got a
too.
question because I can't remember. If you say scored 5 tries and kicked 5 conversions, did it identify your different Lomus, or did it just say 5 tries to Lomu and 5 conversions to Lomu?
Definitely just Lomu. Oh no,
That's
it did.
Nah,
It said Lomu, but
Yes.
if one Lomu got more than one, it would say Lomu 2.
yeah.
Oh, so identified its individual Lomus.
Yeah, it
Yes,
didn't say
it
Lomu
definitely
7.
identified. Couldn't you tell the difference, Sean?
Well, it's like the Australian backline. I had no idea.
I think that could have been one minor flaw in an otherwise perfect game. Maybe numbers on the back would have been good.
I have an image of a YouTube video of the game in front of me, and I don't think they have the pixels for it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't think. Yeah,
You're probably right.
might have been
You're
asking
probably-
a bit too much now. I mean, they couldn't even do blonde hair. Everyone with blonde hair just looks bald.
I think they're doing really well to give the All Blacks white collars.
Yeah, no, fair.
Yeah, nice
Yeah.
touch.
It would have only been good if you were playing on South Terrace anyway.
Great point. Another great point about South Terrace. Okay, so I retract that criticism about the numbers.
Yeah, retract all your criticisms, please.
Oh, yeah, of course. We want to move on to the minnows now.
Yes.
One of the
I
great
just had a
ones.
question.
Yeah, go on.
It might be coming up later, but at what point do you get the barbarians and the lions?
I don't
Great
remember the
question.
barbarians or the lions being in the game at all.
They
Oh,
are
it
in the
rings a
game.
bell to me.
No, they
It rings a
definitely
bell.
were. Because Jeff Wilson used to play fullback for the Barbarians. It was quite a
Yes,
cool
yes,
bonus.
yes. And the barbarians had the classic black and white.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it was in the Territories Cup before you got Rage, Lomus, and Codemasters. You
Yeah,
unlocked
I think so.
the Barbarians and British and Irish Lions. Well, they weren't the British and Irish Lions then. And it was only 2 teams, though. It was just those 2, I think. And you played 1 game, maybe?
Yeah, I can't remember.
The Slacks might be able to tell us.
Yeah.
Any fond memories of playing with the barbarians or the British Lions? Hit us up in the slacks, and we'll do our best to reminisce as well.
Yeah, I'd love to. Yeah, if anyone remembers what those teams were, that would have been pretty cool.
Yes, yeah, the actual lineups.
So I've got a few questions now about minnows. So we've got many minnows, and one of the great parts of this game was just giving a bit of publicity to, your Sri Lankas of the world, your Thailands, who I didn't even realise played rugby at all.
I'm going to cut you off again, Simon, because I'm a terrible podcaster, but I just Googled it. It was the British Lions, the Barbarians, and the World 15.
Yes.
That does ring a bell to World 15.
Mm-hmm. Sorry, as you were. Sorry, that's poor for me.
Quite all right.
I had to know.
Cut that out.
Hey, do we have favourite minnows or favourite players from Minnow Nations?
He's already been mentioned, but Laksanasompong with the kick.
I was a much bigger fan of his flanker counterpart from Thailand, Rajat John Jitakong.
Yeah, that was always special when that was called out, because Laksanasompong, as great as it was, he was the first 5, and that was
You heard it all the time.
You heard it all the time, right? Whereas when you heard that Rajan John Jitakon, that was a great moment.
But you'd have to, as a Hutt Valley kid, you had to like Tonga because you got some Hutt Valley greats there with Phil Rousey.
I'll stop you there. Did he play for Tonga?
Nah, Fiji.
He was in the game. Sorry, Fiji. Sorry, yeah.
Yeah, good. Yeah,
Sorry,
just
he
had to correct you there, Pat. And of course, you get your Hobbam represented with Phil Rousey, and you got Petone represented with Mike Spider Umanga for Manu Samoa. Or were they Western Samoa, or were they still Samoa?
Yeah,
Western Samoa.
forgot about that.
Western Samoa, perhaps back then.
I'm going to hark back to kickers who were on minnow teams.
Yes, let's hear it. Can't wait.
So Sri Lanka's kicker was Bandaranayaka,
What a player.
who played on the left wing, so he was their best player, fending.
Yep. Pace.
He was bald.
Yep.
And I imagine he had a hoop gold earring as well. But I could be wrong. I've got lots on minnows. Should I just keep going?
Yeah, don't stop.
On Bandaranayaka, though, he has to be the best player from a non-World Cup team. And it's not even close.
Oh, I've got a few here.
Okay, let's keep going.
In the Asia Cup, I often went Hong Kong because I liked their crazy Waikato coloured jerseys. Particularly going in well. Who I think was the halfback. Billington! And Tuivai. Hong Kong were a favourite of mine. My all-time favourite was from Romania. And I don't know why I would have played with Romania very often.
They were a World Cup team around those times.
They were a World Cup team. They were.
Yeah. Nikitian. Who was their
What is-
first five?
Was he any good, or you just know his name, based? And that's the funny part. You know his name.
Oh, because I wouldn't have played with him very often, but because he was the first five, you probably heard him all the time. And he had a good boot, decent boot.
Do you just remember this?
So I remembered most of those, but it also took me going back to ESPN.com for World Cup qualifiers from 1993 and
Right.
1994.
So I was going to say, finding footage of the minnows on YouTube is really hard.
It's impossible.
Yeah. Like I was like, I'll have a look at some Jonahs on YouTube. There's not actually much there. And I remember playing with a whole bunch of different teams, just as you get bored, you just want to try out a team you haven't played with. Let's see the German lineup for the '95 season, and but
There was a German
nothing.
team. There was a German team, and there was a player. Maybe it was Kumm or something like that.
It wasn't funny when we were 12. Yeah, I mean, Horikoshi as well. I mean, Horikoshi just the developers were having a laugh. He was about 4'1" at the most, and a great fender. We all found that to be hilarious, of course.
Playing height and weight, 5'3", 63 kgs apparently.
Is that true?
It's Muggsy Bogues-esque,
It's
Small man.
exactly Muggsy Bogues' height, as you know, Bob.
as I know.
Okay. I don't quite have that photographic memory of all the minnows, but I just want to very quickly talk about random fenders from those countries. Bandanayaka, any others? I mean, Otto was a terrible fender for Japan. What was he up to, Otto? You thought he was good. He was hopeless.
He's a right winger, that's why.
Another glitch in the game, really, isn't it?
Right wingers can't fend.
All the left wingers have got at least one tackle they might break.
Yeah, 100%. Like even if they the minnow of minnows, they're going to fend off their back. Which means if you are doing a Territories Cup game or whatever, and you're coming into contact, just before you hit the contact, just turn the other way and fend, and then keep going.
I haven't got those fenders in front of me, apart from every left winger and probably the number 8.
Yeah, number 8s were fairly reliable in that sense as well. Did you have any? This is a very short section. Hopefully, it's not going to be the most exciting. Do we have any kickers you want to shout out apart from your McCabes? I mean, I actually thought Craig Chalmers was a very good player. The Scottish first five, really good boot on him, really quick guy, and I thought he was a really underrated player in general, because Gavin Hastings was obviously a legend of the game, but was really slow, and really only had a good boot. Anyone else of note there, kicking wise?
Yeah, I've got a couple, Simon. A underrated kicker, I would say, was Dominguez from Italy,
Diego,
who was also the slowest player in the game. And I personally thought I liked Arbizu from Argentina, I believe. Had a decent boot. Maybe I just liked him as a player. I don't know if he necessarily had a massive boot, but Gavin Hastings had a massive boot, and Mertens obviously.
Nothing on the kickers.
This is terrible podcasting right now, but does anybody remember the Welsh first five? Because I've got no idea.
It was Jenkins. Was it Jenkins or
Jenkins.
Right.
Neil Jenkins?
Yep.
He had a
Definitely
decent
Jenkins.
boot.
Yeah, he had a good boot.
I can't remember the Irish first five.
Yeah, we just spent all of our time
I
trying
was
to
about-
get Gagan, didn't we? So
It's honestly the first thing that came into my head.
Elwood.
Yes.
I got it. Didn't look that up either. Did not look that up.
I was in the process of looking
Good
it up, I admit.
Elwood. Definitely Elwood. Yeah, happy with that. Get. Okay, yeah, some good kickers there. Yeah, Chalmers, he gets forgotten a bit because Gavin Hastings did the kicking, but I thought Chalmers was sort of Mertens light. Didn't quite have that acceleration off the mark, but was pretty rapid, really, for a first five.
Well-renowned Merton's turn of speed.
Oh, what a turn of speed it was! He was not an overrated player. Oh, and speaking of overrated players, we'll move on to our next section. How's that for a segue?
Seamless.
Who says we do serious average podcasting? No. I've got a few, sadly, here for overrated players. I've mentioned Otto already, who I think just sucked. But I've got a few others as well. And I know I'm the host, and I shouldn't start this, but I'm gonna do it. Jeff Wilson.
Yeah.
One of the great players of all time. Real fast, but lost his
Very
turbo.
quick.
Lost his turbo fairly quickly, and also was a bit of a Paul Grayson with ball in hand. If you were running down the sideline with Wilson, I don't want to harp.
Is that a mug off?
That Gregan tackle, but he lost the ball a lot.
Homage to that tackle, isn't it?
Hmm. And you think you can redeem it by putting him at fullback for the Barbarians, but that's a shit mug off.
His best ability in real rugby was impossible to pull off, which is the chip and chase.
Oh, chip and chase, so good. Yeah, I mean, look, he was a good player. I just feel slightly overrated in Lomu's by the powers that be.
Or perhaps the developers who we know lots about underrated him by making him a bit shit.
Yes, very fair, very fair. So that's
Speaking
one
of
of
the
my
developers, you had that T. Williams, who was the fullback of Rage, who was the biggest man of the game. He wasn't actually that good.
Nah,
For how good Mather was.
Yeah, more of a novelty, wasn't he?
Just big.
He was huge.
Overrated. I'll throw out a Ubugu.
Oh,
Great name.
100%.
Swallow
Great
that,
name.
please. Swallow
Commentators
that, please.
loved him.
Yeah. You wanted Ubugu to run through a whole team, and all he was good for was one fend and then getting smashed.
Yeah.
And slow, my God. The guy couldn't run.
How British of him.
Yeah, I agree.
I've got pretty much every right winger in the game, particularly fantastic wingers, real life wingers like Campese and
But
Yayan Evans.
Can I say, just to quibble with those selections a little bit here, Sam? No true Lomu's player is going to say, who's good? Campese. No one, every time
It's not.
got the ball,
Look,
you were gutted.
My overrated list is it's more like they were good in real life. Why are they not good on Lomu's? The other one was that some people who I have heard rate, and I'm not on the same page, is Rodba.
Yeah, very bad player.
I'm pretty sure he could only fend behind him and possibly
Rodba.
diagonally to back. But he's my only other one on the overrated.
That's minnow-esque. Only being able to fend off your back.
Rodba's a good name for this list. I agree. I thought Rodba was a very overrated player. He was very big. People got excited when he got the ball, but he could only fend off his back, and he was pretty damn slow. So I concur with that.
Yeah, and despite being a blonde, bald player, one of the two, who would know? He was easily identifiable because of his size. So you could get excited if he had the ball because you knew that he could fend. But 9 times out of 10, you might get one away, and then early in the game you get tackled. Later in the game you just cough it up like the rest of the English.
I agree there. Any other names for that overrated list, lads?
Crickets.
Yeah, nothing for me.
I got lots for underrated.
Yeah, I've got a few. I mean, I've got a few underrated players here. I mean, I had Teru Nori Masuho, of course, who we've already talked about. And this is not a very good name because I feel like he's probably properly rated, but Gagan was just one of the great players in the game.
Oh, he's dynamite.
Yeah.
I don't know what that guy looks like in real life either, but he had the Jeff Wilson syndrome. Is he bald or is he blonde hair?
Nah, blonde. Definitely blonde.
Was he blonde? Because he looks bald in the game.
Yeah, he's
Looking him up, I need to know.
He's a great player, absolutely great player in his day.
I don't
yeah.
remember why.
All right, I've got
Very Irish-looking man, that's for sure.
I've got two names that have already been mentioned, which is Craig Chalmers and Masami Horikoshi. I don't know if this one is underrated, but he's just... You can only tackle Olo Brown with a smother tackle. Otherwise, you're leaving a trail of defenders in your wake.
He makes Craig Dowd look very average in comparison for your proppers for the All Blacks. Like
Craig
Olo
Dowd
Brown's
was average. Get that game at the stadium. Get your hands out the ruck, Craig Dowd. Bloody hell. And Eels kicked the penalty to win.
Don't talk about it. I was there, and me and Lee went together, and he didn't talk for the next hour.
Just like he doesn't talk during the haka.
Speaking of Eels, was there any forwards that kicked goals in Jonah's?
Great question.
Ever come across that?
Great question, and I don't think so.
The only one would have been Eels, but it was Liner that kicked goals in.
Yeah.
Sorry, Sam. I'm just going to stop you there. I'm going to keep going.
Yeah, go for it, mate.
I thought Slaytome was underrated.
Definitely underrated. Definitely underrated.
Gavin from the Aussie. He was good.
Tim Gavin, what a
I was
player.
waiting for you to say Hastings after that. Gavin Hastings. But no, you're just talking about Gavin.
I was a fan of Doddy Weir from Scotland, a lock.
Where?
And my most favourite Lomu's player of all time, the Welsh halfback, Rob Howley, who could fend all the way around.
He was a great player in
Wow.
real life.
Yeah.
Howley!
It's
He'd
I'd-
still be
I-
coaching somewhere in the world. He was on the
Yeah,
Welsh
he is.
coaching
What a
staff for
name.
while.
What a name. Rob Howley to pull out. I had no idea he could fend all the way around.
The
That's
Territories
impressive.
couple do that with Wales.
I don't know who was underrated or overrated because, like, the most of my Jonah's rugby was played inside my house against my brother. So, I mean, who was rating people outside of that house? I'm not sure.
Yeah, that's a very fair point. I think one name that I have is English, I think number 8, Dean Richards. Rodber was sort of the glamour man with the blonde hair, big guy. Dean Richards was quite small, kind of
Wonderful.
gingerish. Yeah, gingerish hair, I think. And he was quick. He could fend all around. And his turbo didn't run out really quickly. And I think if you could recognise who Dean Richards was, that was the key, because he didn't stand out like a Rod. But if you could recognise who he was, people didn't often give him the respect of a smother, and you could just fend your way through. But if people were willing to smother, you could sort of beat people with pace. So Dean Richards is my pick for the most underrated player in the game. That's him for mine.
That's fair. I mean, I barely remember him, so for you to give that sizable review, and
Don't remember him at all.
it says to me he was really underrated because clearly I didn't rate him enough to remember him.
Yeah, that's fair.
All right. Anything else on the underrated players list before we go to Sean for an important announcement?
Got one more thing before the important announcement. It just came to me earlier while we were talking. So, what is the unbeatable Lomu's player? I'm not talking about like a player in the game. I'm talking about like the characteristics of a game player. Who is that type of player? Like, I'm thinking someone who's extremely fast button masher.
Oh, got to be good at the ruck.
But what else? Like in terms of maybe tactics, taking advantage of glitches.
Someone that's good at bunting, fending, offloads, rucking, and scoring tries off the walls and kicking the ball out as soon as they're ahead at full time.
I think
Easy.
I think Pat brings up a good point. Like, it depends on the rules, but the best players I played with were really good at rucks and really good at offloads, and they were both acceptable parts of the game where I played.
So but then there's someone like Cam, who Simon played a lot with, where there were no offloads. So, but what made Cam so good? That he's a completely different player to
Oh, but if he had
People who
off
shouldn't
flicks,
play, but
it'd still be really good as well. Yeah, I think he was just good lines. I think Pat alluded earlier to the fact that actually, if you ran a good line in the midfield, that was often far more effective than a sidestep. Ran good lines and just quick passing really was really effective.
I think the lines thing is really important because a lot of people would tend to spread left to right, left to right, left to right. But people who were able to cut inside without the step, just the natural cut inside, could really tear up through the middle.
Yep.
It looked
Big
the
part
best
of the
as
game.
well.
much
It
easier
looks
to
so
do on
good.
South Terrace.
Shut up.
So,
I've got one more underrated that would have to go in just because I'm going through the 95 World Cup, just seeing what the finishing order was. I reckon an underrated team would have to be Ivory Coast because apparently they played in the 95 World Cup.
I sure did.
Brito.
Max Brito, may he have a happy life
What?
after he was sadly paralysed in the 95 World Cup.
Ah, unbelievable.
The Ivorian coasters are a great part of the game, to be honest. Like that's not something you expect to see in a rugby playing game, and to have them in there
Yeah,
as part of your minnows selection, what a team.
yeah, it's
Can't
fantastic.
believe how many teams they put in. Unbelievable.
You can't even get the All Whites in a FIFA game.
Yeah.
So we just talked about what makes a great player, the attributes for a great player. Bob, you want to sort of talk about something that's a possibility?
Look, the most important thing of my college years was the Jonah Lomu rugby tournament. And, we played for a pretty big shield, courtesy of Valley Indoor Sports. And, they're my fondest memories, even if our last tournament did end in a letterboxing incident that I won't bring up again. And so what I'd like to do, wish it was the 90s, to provide for the people of Aotearoa, New Zealand, is a Lomu's tournament. Rules to be decided, format to be decided based on numbers, but create a event on Facebook where if you click attending, you'll be registered as a player. But also you can reach out to us, any of us personally, or via our Gmail, WIWT90s@gmail.com.
That's not happening.
or just turn up on the day. I think we'll have a small window for registrations. But yeah, I'd love to see a tournament happen. And I think as long as our fans are prepared to help us out with maybe a few discs, a few controllers, maybe even a PS1 or PS2 or two. I think we can run an amazing tournament for people like ourselves who absolutely love this game. So that's what I'd love to see, and I think it's possible, but we will need a bit of support to get there. So if you think you're the best player, find your copy of Lomu's and get in touch, and we'll run an exceptional tournament. And I think it'll be the culmination of everything this podcast has been building towards.
There'll be giveaways.
There will be giveaways.
We can put something together.
There'll be optional letterboxing. Maybe a little bit of egging. But yeah,
This was definitely the biggest game of the 90s, especially around the Hutt Valley. So I think we can get a pretty good crew together for a tourney.
Yeah. Look, and the numbers don't really matter, small numbers, round robin, big numbers, knockout. We'll provide opportunities for people to come in early and practice. Like this could be the greatest thing that's happened, maybe ever.
Can we do it like a 7s tournament though? Like you got like, you know, you can play for the plate and then the.
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, if it's anything like
Because
Lomu's
there's a few of
tournaments,
us that haven't played any other game since Lomu's went out of. You know,
Pat's scribing his name on the horse's ass trophy already.
just trying to make an excuse early on in the piece.
Well, if you're interested in that, hit us up in the Slacks. Thanks for listening. It's been a great podcast. And we don't have a professional outro that we do. We just
Yeah, Sean's going to sign us off, I think.
Oh, is he?
Is he? Yeah, I've got something.
Here we go.
That's just a consolation podcast.
Yeah.